90% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get pumped, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in they Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters don't move. Whatever clique you choose. What about staff assaults? Did you see a lot of staff assaults?
Not a lot, maybe 5, 10, maybe about 5 the whole time I was there.
So can you think back and tell me to maybe the first time you saw a staff assault?
A white female getting assaulted from a black inmate. I remember that.
Okay, and so you actually viewed the assault and seen it. You was working when it happened?
No, I never viewed it, but when we got there, it was just like kind of like ending. They had the inmate cuffed up, and she had 2 black eyes, and you know, she put up a good fight. It wasn't just no he had his way with her. She fought him back pretty good.
Right.
And I always remember the feeling you have on you. You know, just because inmates get mad when officers assault their inmate partners or assault another inmate, they get mad. We feel the same way, probably more, that an inmate put his hand on one of ours.
Right. And can you recall what the situation was about?
He asked for something and she wouldn't give it to him. He got mad and started hitting her. And she fought him back.
And I tell a story on my page too about a vicious assault that I seen where a convict assaulted a female staff. And what happened with that is basically this: the guard, she was extremely cool when it came to in terms of guards. You know, we had closed B's and closed A's. You know, who had to lock up at certain times. Yeah. They would let the closed B's stay out and stuff like that. So a black convict called the CO the B word, and so she got mad and wanted all the black convicts to discipline this dude. You know, and so basically somebody told her, hey, you know, you cool, but we definitely can't beat the dude up because he disrespected staff. So then in turn, she gets mad. She goes into all the cells, the black cells, and takes things that's on their property that we're allowed to have, you know, TVs, headphones, stuff like that. So she happened to take something from this black dude, and he wasn't going for it. He told her, hey, listen, you better give me my stuff back. I'm not playing. She didn't give it back. He went upside her head and beat her real bad. And just so happened, an alarm had went off outside. So the officer who works on the floor had went outside to respond to the alarm. Now, originally the lady who was on the floor, she was like a rookie and she was new. So the 2 regular guards, it was a man and a woman, they put her in the tower since they was familiar with everybody on the floor. So when the alarm goes off outside, one guard in the building, he runs outside. So it leaves her by herself in the building. He ends up beating her real bad. The new lady that's in the tower, she was panicking and couldn't even open up the back door or the grill gate to let the guards back in. So he beat her for a long time. So of course, you know, they came in and finally got him. What's your opinion on that right there? I mean, what should have the guard done better? Because of course the dude shouldn't have beat her up like that, but I think people fail to realize from the inmate's perspective that, you know, at certain times we feel that the guards are abusing their power of authority. You know, they're come to our cell. You know how they do. They come to our cell sometimes, search the cell, leave it all messed up intentionally. So what's your opinion on that situation?
My first thought is that she never should have went and took anything out of an inmate cell that they supposed to have. Now you can go up in there and take things that they're not supposed to have. That's okay. But to take stuff that's on their books like TVs or headphones, that's on their books. That's she was wrong in that aspect. Mm-hmm. But he's also wrong when he ended up putting his hands on her. He's wrong for that.
Right. Because he definitely could have went and talked to a sergeant and a lieutenant and got his stuff back immediately. But like I said, you know, I just think that the rage and anger he felt, like, how dare you? Basically, you're using your position to bully me. You know, you're using your position to come take some of my stuff, and I'm not going for it. But in terms of the inmate that you saw who was beating the guard, was he beat up and stuff later on, in your opinion, or to your knowledge?
Let me run some down to you. Back in the days, this is what was supposed to happen. And the old folks, they had a rule, and I don't know what other prison they had this rule. You put your hand on staff, you got 3 whoopings. You got a whooping on the scene, you got a whooping till you got in the holding cell, you got another whooping when you got to R&R going to the hold. Uh-huh. That was just the inmates knew it.
Right.
That's just the way it was back in the day. But later on, they stopped that.
Uh-huh. And because I seen that there's another YouTuber who was a former prison guard, and he didn't start working until 2006, and he said that, you know, prisoners, convicts didn't get beat up for assaulting staff. And so in my era, I knew that to be false. So maybe in his era, maybe things had changed.
It had. By 2006, it had changed. Mm-hmm. But back when I started, those were the rules. And everywhere you went from the holding cell, everybody knew this is a staff assaulter. You got to the hold, this is a staff assaulter. And they would do anything to push your button. Right.
And I just recently told a story of I had a cellie, and this was, I don't know when his actual incident occurred, but he was my cellie in the hole like in 2004, 2005. He told a story about assaulting staff in Lancaster. Later on, once he got to the hole, he said the guards ran in his cell about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and whooped him so bad. He said that he urinated and defecated blood for about a week. He said, had him crying. And this dude was maybe about 6'3", 230, 240, So he said he got whooped real bad.
Yeah, those are the rules. Mm-hmm. Those were the rules. Uh-huh. That's still going with a lockdown behind it.
Right. Now, when I first started doing my page or doing my YouTube, I had mentioned there were times when guards would give the convicts one-on-one fights. Now, there was a dude, I won't say who he was, right? But I felt he should have known better. He was older than me, had been going to prison probably in the 80s and this and that. He said that was untrue. Have you ever heard of a guard going into a cell or some type of where giving a prisoner a one-on-one fair fight?
Yes, I heard of it on the shoe yard. I heard of it on the shoe yard.
Do you think
know what changed?
What was that?
An inmate went out to the yard or to the shoe yard with an officer, a one-on-one, like you say. The inmate ended up whooping the officer. The officer went back and tried to get an inmate a 115 violation for staff assault, I guess. Mm-hmm. That's when everything changed.
Right.
Because the first thing the inmate would tell me, say, you wouldn't be doing that if you had to take that badge off, take that belt off, we can handle it. Mm-hmm. That was normal practice back in them days.
Right. So
take that badge off and take that belt off, we'll go out to the shoe yard and handle it.
And so it happened a lot, huh?
I ain't gonna say a lot, but it happened.
Right. Because I remember when I got to Salinas, I was in a cell with a dude from Compton known as Big H, and one of his homeboys had got into it with a sergeant. And later that night or later that evening, when we had to lock down for 4 o'clock, this was a 180. They brought the convict. He was a Crip back into that area to that behind the gates where the commissary and the canteen and the church is, and let him fight the sergeant one-on-one.
Yeah, what happened was when the officers start losing, when they start losing, they want to get, want to write the inmate up. That's how we can't do this no more.
Right.
You want the one-on-one, he beats you, hey, shake hands and call it a day.
Right.
But they pride wouldn't let them do that.
Uh-huh. And so when you first started working in 89, that's well before they took the weights. Can you describe some of the sizes that you've seen on some of these dudes? Did they have some pretty big dudes back then?
Oh, some great big dudes. I mean, the biggest guy I seen was a ex-pro basketball player. He was about 6'10", 7 foot tall. But I mean, with muscles, just yoked out. And I seen him, I was like, wow, big old dude.
Right.
But you had people back there throwing up, 400-500 pounds on the bench like it wasn't nothing, though.
And so was that the physical presence of some of those dudes? Was that intimidating?
You had to know what you were doing when you approached them. When you came out, you had to know what you were doing. And that's just what it was. But let me run something by you here. When they weights, had to be in 90, 94, 95, they took the weights away.
I think it was somewhere about 96, because right when I went to the pen, they had just started taking them. Actually, Salinas Valley, A-Yard still had them. I was on D-Yard. We didn't have any on D-Yard, but A-Yard still had it for about 6 months, I believe, and then they took them.
Yeah, they took the weights away around that time. And the officers weren't in favor of taking the weights. Administration, people sitting in the big brass chairs, they was in favor of it because they said these guys are getting too big, they doing this. But as an officer, you was in favor of the weights because at New Folsom, we were issuing with a thing called a weight card. Stayed out of trouble, you didn't get into no disciplinary stuff. You had a weight card, you can go to the weight pile, you can lift, and you was good. But when you got in trouble, the first thing they do is they take your weight card. You can't get in the weight pile no more.
Right.
So it was cool on both sides. Then when they said, oh, we're going to take the weights away. Some of the guys, they never got small when the weights went away. They still were using water bags. They were lifting magazines or whatever they could lift. They were doing push-ups and dips and pull-ups. They doing everything, burpees. They doing all, and still keeping some of their size. Right.
And I told a story about the biggest crip that I ever seen. It was a dude who I had met down in the county jail in Riverside, man. His name was Dan Tanner. He was from Long Beach. He had happened to come down. He was already in prison, and he happened to come down on another case. And you actually said that you worked and you knew Dan Tanner.
Yeah, I know Dan Tanner. I knew him from C-Yard.
So was he as big as I described him?
He's a big fella, but big agile fella. Could play basketball like the best. He can do it all. He was just a gifted athlete, to tell the truth.
Right. And you actually told me that you also seen him get into a fight. We won't say who we got into a fight with, but you seen him get into a fight. Did his hands work?
Dangerous. Dangerous. He knocked that boy out a couple of times.
Were they out there fighting on the yard or something?
They was on the yard fighting. The other guy was pretty good size, but he couldn't handle Tanner.
Right. And like you said, and like I said in my story, for his height and his size, he was extremely fast. He was extremely fast and agile. He could dunk, backflip, all that type of stuff.
Do it all. For a big guy like that, he can do it all.
Yeah. I think when I seen him, he was maybe about 6'2", maybe about 255, 260, but it was all muscle. This dude was a big old giant, dude. And down there in the county jail, all the guards was obviously scared of him. It's shown. They cowered to him, bowed down to him, and he did not pretty much what he wanted to, but what he wanted to do down there.
When I met China, he wasn't aggressive towards staff. He pretty much stayed out the way. He did his thing, stayed out the way. I never had any problem with him, but he was the enforcer for the Long Beach car.
And so getting back to the politics with the Crips and the Bloods and all that type of stuff, Who did you think was more, I guess, more deadly? Were the Crips or the Bloods, or was it a particular section, a particular faction of the Crips?
The more deadlier, I would say, was the Bloods, to tell you the truth.
Uh-huh.
The Bloods are more organized. They
Right.
didn't have those different fraction of like Crips had. The Compton car, the Long Beach car, this car. Crip and the Bloods, you know, they had one pretty much. They have 3 or 4 leaders, but they ran more together because they was outnumbered.
Right. And so while you was there, did you ever see any riots or melees break out between the Crips and the Bloods?
The funniest one I ever seen was it started over some chili beans on a hot dog, where the blood goes through the line and the Crip serving chili. I guess he felt that the Crip didn't give him enough, or he asked for more and the Crip didn't give it to him. So they had a little words exchange. So the next morning at yard release, the Blood go up and holler at the Crip, say what he had to say to him. The Crip say something back. They start fighting. Started out as a 1-on-1, now it's a 2-on-1, now it's a 2-on-2. Before you know it, it's a big old melee, Bloods and Crips. And crazy thing about it, I hit probably about 10 dudes with my baton on their ankles. No, that was just pop them on the ankles, get their attention, and they all left the way. But afterwards, no problem. It's just, you know, you did what you had to do. I did what I had to do. That's just where it is.
Right. And it's funny, like you say, because I would honestly say maybe 95, 90, even maybe 98% of the arguments and fights in prison are always over something small. But due to the gang mentality held by so many people in there, people not wanting to be seen as a punk, or not feeling that, you know, they're going to bow down, or just really a lack of conflict resolution skills, always led to, you know, bigger and badder things. I had a homie that used to say all the time, small things grow to be big things in prison if left unchecked, you know. And you know, a fight over a handball, a table, a telephone, you know, showers, all the riots and stuff, stabbings and stuff, always over something small.
Something small.
Back when you first started working in '89, you know, because when I came to prison in '96, if a person got stabbed, they would lock the yard down and we'd be on lockdown and stuff, maybe a week, maybe even longer than that, you know, even if it was an isolated incident. But you was telling me back in your day, there would be several stabbings on the yard and they would just come get the person that was stabbed and resume normal program.
If they locked them down, it's only for that day. You hear resume yard. You hear that all the time. Resume yard. They get him, put him on a gun and take him on off, whatever, and get the 2 dudes involved or whatever, and roll them off and resume yard. But it all depends. If it was a racial situation, they probably have a yard recall. Right. But it's house cleaning, as they call it, house cleaning, or removal. Right. Resume yard.
Back when you first started, were stabbings a regular occurrence? Did they happen a lot, or?
It happens in spurts. I remember when I first got to Old Folks, and we had a stabbing every Friday for about a month. Every Friday we had a stabbing. Right. And then finally, I think the last one they killed the inmate.
Do you feel that one race was doing more stabbing than the other, or was it kind of equally balanced out, or what? You know, what race?
It was the whites. The whole time it was the whites stabbing each other. We used to call it spring cleaning.
And so is that because you feel like maybe somebody had pulled up with bad paperwork or something, or?
Bad paperwork, or had done something against their rules and regulations, or, you know, a thief, might have stole something from another race, all kind of stuff. The other way, owe some money, owe some dope money. You know, that's 2 or 3 ways to get in trouble real fast in prison is gambling, you know, stealing, you know, or drugs. Those are 3 fast ways of getting in trouble with the fellas doing those things and not being able to pay.
Now, I believe you, and then you eventually said you made it to sergeant, right?
Yes, sir.
So I'm sure you eventually you know that um the Hispanics are not supposed to do drug deals with the blacks. Are you aware of that?
Yes, yes. So I was a yard officer. I mean, I know all the rules.
Do you did you ever hear of, despite those rules, blacks and Hispanics doing business deals?
Yes, I heard about it. But it wasn't a problem as long as they was paying. It was not a problem. The problem
Right,
start when they don't pay.
right. And of course, you know, you and I, we both know that. But like I say again, once again, for the people in YouTube land, sometimes they'll hear something and believe everything they hear. You know, there's a lot of things that go on in prison that's not supposed to go on. And like we say, there would never even be a prison if people would do what they're supposed to do. You know, people will say, "Hey, chill. Well, I thought that, you know, the Hispanics are not supposed to do business with blacks." Well, yeah, well, people are not supposed to kill each other either, but they do. You know, and so.
It only become a problem when the person don't pay.
Right.
As long as they paying, you're not going to hear about it because each individual got their money, got their drugs. You don't hear about it. It's when they start where you can't pay.
Right. And so I often get asked about, and I guess sometimes we don't shine enough light on the others, the other car, the Asians, the Asians, Samoans, Koreans. What did you come to find out about them, and what about their car and stuff?
Their car was a smooth car, ran together. They took care of business. Somebody was in their car. They didn't want them in there. They took care of business, but they ran a smooth car. And what I did realize about the Asians, that all the Asians got together except for the Vietnamese. The Vietnamese had their own car. They was separate from the other Asians.
Wow, no, that's new to me. Can I'd never heard that. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that, on why you think that was?
The Vietnamese just separate themselves from the Cambodians, the Laotians, and people like that. They separate themselves from them for some reason. I don't know what happened. I know on the B yard they had a big fight with the Vietnamese and the Laotian, Cambodians. They fought each other, but when they came in my yard, they separated themselves.
Right. That's interesting. And so, you seem like you seem like you would have been a real cool officer. You know, I mean, there are some officers that we consider cool, you know, and what I mean by that is, you know, dudes who don't go out of their way to just harass us, mess with us. You know, you have some officers who made me feel they thought that they was part of the judge's sentence and making sure we didn't get nothing, you know, make sure we don't get nothing more than what the state required us to get. You know, how did you do your time in terms of dealing with the convicts and prisoners up in there?
One thing I did, I tried to treat everybody with respect. If the state said you were supposed to get it, I'm going to give it to you. That's just where it was. It's not my job to come in there and give you extra sentence, extra punishment. That's not my job. I don't get paid for that. I don't get an extra check for that. So why do it?
I've heard a lot about that. You know, when riots and stuff happen in prison, the guards got something that's called hazard pay or something like that. Is that true?
No. No, that's not true. Not unless they started after I retired.
Right.
That's not true.
And when did you retire?
I retired in September 2012.
Oh, okay. And so why did you only become a sergeant? Did you not want to go higher? Because you obviously could have went higher.
I wanted to make lieutenant before I retired, but then I seen everything was changing too much. You know, I'm a military man. And when I first started the prison system, the grooming standards was officers, the way the uniform was worn was decent. But it got to the point where didn't nobody care. As long as they showed up to work, that was all good. I couldn't work like that. You know, you had disrespectful officers and disrespectful young inmates. It was going to be a problem sooner or later. Right.
And I had one guard tell me one time, he said, excuse me, I had a guard tell me something along these terms. He told me, the same way that you guys discipline each other and make sure you guys are held to a certain standard. He said we do that with the guards too. He said because we don't want a guard talking reckless or doing something crazy and causing a situation where we all have to respond, and it jeopardizes all our lives, all our health, all our safety. Did you guys have something like that? I mean, is that true? Is that
we called it parking lot therapy.
Uh-huh.
That's what we call parking lot therapy.
Right.
You had an officer that was doing things that they wasn't supposed to do, doing something inappropriate that was affecting everybody's life and liberty. So we get them to the parking lot. We'll try to talk to them some cases. Some cases you had to put your hands on them. But you had to let them get their attention. Say, hey, we all got trying to go back home to our families every day. You causing us not to do that. So you need to stop.
Right. And I've never seen it personally myself, but there are some prisons where, depending on where you're housed, you can look out and see into the parking lot. And I have heard of other convicts saying, well, yeah, they had saw, guards out there fighting in the parking lot.
Yeah, it happens.
Uh-huh.
It happens. But all that stuff stopped though. It used to be, rampant, but then they stopped it because some like inmates that go tail, you got guards that go tail. Right. So it stopped. Nobody's trying to lose their job. Or what they would do is kind of like isolate you. If you were doing something inappropriate, well, they will isolate you. Nobody wanted to work with you.
Uh-huh. And then earlier you had said something of how, things had started changing in the later years of you doing your job. And I've heard when I first got to prison, I would hear some guards say, I'm a prison guard. Don't call me a CO. It was almost the equivalent of how convicts refer to themselves as convicts and saying it was a big difference between a convict and an inmate. In your opinion, is it a difference between a guard and a correctional officer?
Yes. A guard didn't have much training. They showed up to the institution. They got trained at the institution. They stayed at the institution. But a correctional officer, those are the ones who got training. They got 6 weeks, 12 weeks, or 6 of training before they went to the institution. They knew the rules and regulations. They didn't have to learn them on the fly. And that's the difference between a guard and a correctional officer. The training, not at the institution, went outside the institution, you got trained. Weapons training, every kind of training you had, you got it before you went to the institution.
Right. And some of these guards who had mentioned that also made it seem like a correctional officer was more inmate friendly and more in his feelings as to where a guard really didn't really give a damn about the convict. Sometimes I would hear them say, these correctional officers, they love inmates too much. They try to accommodate you guys too much. How do you feel about that?
We came through in different eras.
Right.
His era was he could do that stuff and get away with it. Our era, we couldn't do it because they had the 602 appeal process where they could write you, and they could write an officer up. And then you had to go ahead and answer that 602. You didn't want to answer 2030 602. You didn't want to do that. So you just did what was right. You did follow the book and you did what was right. Mm-hmm. They didn't have an appeal process back in them days.
And I definitely noticed a change in, I have to be fair here when I say Black prisoners, from the time I first came in 96 to the time I left in 2018, it definitely seemed like there was less unity, there was less structure, there was less information being provided. When I first came in 96, man, just by being Black, whether they was Crips or Bloods, somewhat looked out for me, even if it was just giving me information, making sure I knew what was going on, making sure I knew where to go, where to hang out, where my people was. Later on, it seemed like, the younger generation, I would say maybe about, I don't know, maybe 2009, somewhere up in there. Some of these dudes they was wild for better lack of the word. They didn't really have any prison training. They would do a bunch of stuff. They didn't care about being caught stealing and just a whole bunch of stuff. Do you think you've seen a change from the time you started to the time you left in Black prisoners?
Oh, yes. Big change. When I started in 89, the OGs pulled a youngster to the side and schooled them. No, OGs in that car, they put them to the side, they screwed them, told them that we don't do this, we don't do that. We don't like masturbation. We don't do that. If you do it, you make sure don't nobody see you doing it. You know, that disrespect, they didn't allow that. But now it's like the youngsters are like calling everybody the N-word. The OGs back in the days wouldn't allow that. You wouldn't do that. But now it's every day's rampant. Every day. I had to get a lot of inmates just sitting there calling each other the N-word all day long. I like, oh man, y'all can't figure out another word. The dictionary full of words, you can't pick out another word beside that one.
Right.
And that's the change, the leadership change. You couldn't put your hands on the inmate like back in the day. They would beat them up, tell them stay in the cell for a couple of days and come on out. You good. You couldn't do that no more.
And when you speak of like leadership, how was the black leadership when you first started working and stuff?
That's when you had the A numbers, the B numbers, the C numbers. They've been down a while. They know how things supposed to be running, and they pass their knowledge on to these young inmates coming in. They wouldn't let them do crazy stuff. They would check them on the yard in front of everybody. They would check them. Some of them they had to beat them up a little bit, but like I say, you beat them up, tell them go to the cell and don't come out for a couple of days. We'll make sure you got food, whatever. Just don't come out because you got knotted up. That's just where it was.
And I remember one time I was in Ironwood and there was a dude who had got caught stealing a black dude or something like that, and they told the guard who was working in the tower that, hey man, we need to discipline this dude, or it's going to lead to a bigger problem. The guard in the tower said, hey, well, look, man, at 12:45, I'm going to be over there on that side getting some coffee. He said, you guys do what you need to do. Just make sure you don't stab him. Make sure you don't kill him so I don't have to write paperwork up. Did things like that occur back when you was working, that guards would sometimes look the other way?
Yes. You let them handle their business. That was discipline that you didn't have to deal with, especially when it comes to them stealing from another race. That's going to create a big problem. Blacks stealing from whites, whites stealing from whites, whites stealing from blacks, or Mexicans stealing. No, you take care of that real fast because that's going to start a big ride. It's going to be a ride behind that.
Right. So
the blacks got to take care of their own, the whites got to own, the Mexicans got to take care of their own. And you avoid problems like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you, in your honest opinion, Daryl, do you feel, if any, who ran the prison? Do you feel a particular race ran prison?
Yes.
Who do you think?
The Southern Hispanics. The Southern Hispanics ran those prisons.
Mm-hmm. And when you say they ran the prisons, in what aspects are you talking about? How did they run the prison?
For because at Old Folsom and New Folsom was Southern friendly prisons. They gave the Southerners a little bit of leeway they wouldn't give everybody else. Because the main reason, because Southern Hispanics don't disrespect officers. That's part of their paperwork. You don't disrespect an officer. Only time you put your hand on an officer when an officer put their hand on you. That's the only time. If you did assault the officer, you had to get permission from the higher up to do it. Mm-hmm. So they had a car, and their car was dangerous. Their car took care of business when they had to, and that's just where it was.
Right. And so, back when you started working in '89 too, you had more prisoners in positions like with, jobs, clerks and stuff like that. So are you saying that the Hispanics ran the prison through the jobs and stuff like that, or they dictated what everybody else did?
The job. Everybody kind of, I'm not saying fear the Southern Mexicans, but you knew they was there. They didn't bother anybody unless you bothered them, but you knew they was gonna take care of their business when they had to.
Right.
You knew that. No, like I say, the black cars is always divided. Only time the black cars came together with doing adverse stuff, big fights and stuff that they'll come together for a short period of time. After everything was done, they right back in their little groups and corners. That's just the way it was.
When you first started working in '89, because I've heard some dudes talk about back in the days they let, you know, the Crips, the Bloods have blue rags and red rags and stuff like that. Was it like that when you was working?
Yes. When I first started, old folks, when they had blue rags and red rags.
And do you feel that contributed to the gang tension, or that didn't play a part in it?
I don't know if it contributed to the tension of the gang, because everybody seemed to know who's who because of what area they hung in on the yard. Bloods had a certain area on the yard. The Crips had a certain area on the yard. Bay Area had a certain area on the yard. And that's where they hung at. You knew who was who. When they got to your block, you knew Bloods from Crips because of tattoos or the way they wore their hair. You knew it.
Right. And so back then, was there a lot of like telling in prison and stuff, people dropping kites and stuff like that? Because I think that the population, the free population believes that, you know, all the hard guys are in prison. There's no telling and stuff going on. What was it like when, you know, during your watch?
They'll tell. No, but they did it in a way where you didn't know who was telling. They'd get a kite and put it in the mailbox to staff, dress it to staff or stuff like that.
Right.
Or you had officers that had their confidential informants. They would tell them what's going on, that kind of stuff.
Right.
I'm gonna tell you a funny story. When I was on the C yard, we had a flag football league. The inmates play against each other. We had a certain inmate that got a kite dropped on him every Friday. He was the quarterback of the team. They didn't want him to quarterback. So every Friday, dropped a kite on this guy. By the time Monday came along, he'd come back to the yard. Friday come along again, they drop another kite on him. Finally got to the championship game. He told me, he said, I was so scared they were going to come get me, I couldn't even play.
And that's crazy. And so this was a black dude?
Yeah.
So then obviously it was black people dropping the kite on him, right?
Oh, yeah. Because you got to realize Mexicans can't play football with blacks. Mexicans can't play basketball with blacks. That's part of their house rules. They can't play football, basketball, nothing with blacks. Part of the house rules.
And so what were some of the different duties you performed like as a CO?
I did it all. I was yard officer for a long time. I worked in blocks. I worked in the Central Tower, guns. I worked in the control booth, guns, you know, all that kind of stuff. I was on the security investigation squad for a while. I did it all. I was a gang investigator. I did all that.
Is there any I want to say act of violence or incident that happens that stands out in your mind more than others?
Not to stand out for us, the inmates, no. But for us, say a lieutenant not allowing you to do your job after somebody gets stabbed. He want to go resume real quick. Or go ahead and do chow. Hey, let's go do chow. We have to do chow. That ain't the way I was trained. Especially when you walk into your building, you find 2 weapons on the floor in your building because he wouldn't let you do your job. You get 2 people, but it's 4 people involved. The other 2 people get away.
And then I had a question earlier that I wanted to ask you. I forgot, but it just popped back up into my mind now. When I was incarcerated, you know, you'd hear some blacks saying that speaking Swahili or being caught with certain George Jackson books could get you validated, sent to the whole certain black literature. Is there any truth to that?
That's true. Absolutely true. George Jackson books, that's a 1 point on your validation. Didn't understand it, but we had to deal with it.
So just having, so if you was to search a cell and see that a inmate had some George Jackson reading material, you'd have to give him that 1 point or however it went.
You had if you know what you was doing. All officers don't know what they're doing. Some people know what they're doing. They're going, okay, this is like the book Blood in My Eyes. Everybody know that's a George Jackson book.
Right.
They may get caught with that because they're not allowed to have it in the institution. So you get caught with it. So okay, that's a validation point. 2 more points, now you considered a BGF member.
Wow. And you know, I always thought that I didn't believe that, because I'm thinking like, you know, because in terms of especially by the time I came to prison, in terms of prisoners' rights and stuff, California prisons are pretty liberal compared to other prisons. You know, they would have these like California Prison Network news stuff that you could read, and I would read them from time to time. And you know, the other prisons that, you know, their mail was censored, and compared to other prisons, California prisoners had a lot of rights. So I'm just thinking that how can they censor, you know, certain reading material? You know, I can understand we can't have books about bomb making and prison escapes, but I never did believe that. So that is true. So what about just speaking Swahili?
Speaking Swahili is not against no rules and regulations. It's not against the rules and regulations. Swahili came about because the Mexican was speaking Spanish. They could speak Spanish in front of most blacks, and most blacks would know what they were saying. So the BGF and people like that came up with Swahili so that they can talk in front of the Mexican. The Mexican wouldn't know what they were saying.
Right.
So that was not against the rules and regulations to speak Swahili.
The whole 23 years that you worked, how many deaths you say occurred while you were working?
On my yard?
On your yard, or yeah, well, let's start with on your yard. None.
Not on the yard, inside the cells, stuff like that. Yeah, when I was a yard officer, never had one.
Uh-huh. But what about in that particular facility that you was working?
They had 1, maybe 3.
Uh-huh. Well, Daryl, I done had you on here for a long time, man, and I definitely appreciate you coming through here and sharing your experience. And actually, I would hope, and I think that my viewers are going to definitely want you back. I would like for you to come back and share more of your personal stories and experiences and stuff like that, man. And you know, I definitely realize I got to get some more questions for you, because you have a lot of wealth and information and knowledge about prison and stuff, man. And I definitely enjoyed having you on today.
Well, brother, it's an honor and a pleasure. Shout out to 16 to Life, and it was a pleasure speaking with you, brother.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it very much. And so would you be willing in the future to come back and share some stories and stuff with us?
I'm your man, brother. All you got to do is call me. We'll set it up. We can do it.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it very much, man. And you enjoy the rest of your day.
Spraying everything from a nigga's brain to his knee. I don't put shit on Facebook, I just holler in person. Put the pistol in your mouth while you're hollering and cursing. All that shit you kept rehearsing and put on your live. Got your clap with the big 4-5, you bitch nigga. If you tell me to pull up, I'ma do that. That nigga who was woofing, first nigga that I shoot at. Ski mask on my face, bystanders be like, who that? I ain't with the talking, bitch boy, I thought you knew that. Leave his brains where my shoe at, and bounce like I'm on a trampoline. Leave you laid out, nigga, like you camping on the scene. If you want something sweet, grab a peach or tangerine. Niggas won't smoke, well fuck it, I'ma let them handle steam. AR with the beam, you see the red dot? We'll tug on this trigger, nigga, it'll make your head pop. Blood pouring down to your shoes, call it Red Sox. Your brains hanging all over your shoulders like some dreadlocks. Expect the gang of dead ops if they ever cross the line. The Lord said in the Bible, oh, revenge is mine. So I'm just trying to find a righteous path between the two. Before I lose control and do the shit I used to do. This being humble shit is new, I'm trying to turn the other cheek. But I ain't never been a bitch, so watch your mouth when you speak. Your mercy's what I seek, so I pray on bended knees. Don't let me get the K with the extended clip and squeeze. Lord, please. Dear God, please don't let me relapse and return to the G-Ride with 3 straps. The ski mask with the K squeezing key zaps, spraying everything from a nigga's brain to his kneecaps. Dear God, please don't let me relapse and return to the G-Ride with the 3 straps. The ski mask with the K squeezing key zaps, spraying everything from a nigga's brain to his kneecaps.